Good morning.
Good morning.
Haven't seen such a large crowd in a while. Is something going on? Well, it's lovely to see everybody here. I am glad. Can everybody hear me all right? Coming in loud and clear? Good. All right, Isabella, we are good. We're okay. So good morning, everyone. So this is the long anticipated 2024 budget and rate increase presentation. I think in previous years, due to the way the rates were approved and then subsequently the budget was approved, I think you had two different presentations. I think you had the rate increase presentation, and then I believe you had another budget presentation. Actually, I think I'm the one who did the budget presentation in my first town hall in January earlier this year. So I have a little bit of experience under my belt. This presentation is available online. It's on Touchtown under Administration. It is under Office of Insurance Regulation. It's a separate, it's not an all residents meeting. This really is from a regulatory perspective, an OIR required meeting. So I put it under there. It's available there now. So anybody who's following along at home and may have difficulty seeing the presentation on Touchtown, you can access it there. No jumping to the end. And then for those of you who would like a hard copy of this presentation, Sandy has run off color copies, and they'll be available after the presentation at Sandy's desk. We're burning up some ink and paper right now with that presentation.
Sandy's desk.
So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and move into the presentation. We've always start off with the big four goals, but for me, this is kind of the alignment of the big four goals, right? A lot of Venn diagrams going on, but ultimately, it's the resident experience at the heart of this. And making sure that this is a great place to live that is long-term sustainable, right? We're making a commitment to you, you are making a commitment to us, and we have to operate in a manner that ensures that we are long-term sustainable. So many of the commitments that the organization kind of quantifies, having exceptional talent in terms of our workforce, delivering that personalized resident experience. We've all heard Jesse say we want to make sure that we delight, and we indeed do. Lead with quality, operate highly occupied communities, and be financially strong. So I think hopefully throughout the course of the presentation, you'll see me weave these elements in throughout. I know some of you are familiar with this, so I'll just do this at a high level. What does our budget planning process look like? It starts in midsummer and runs through September with various individual meetings that occur both at the support center level and at the community level, where we review capital requests from the community. We review occupancy, both historical and projections. We look at pricing, we look at all of our competitors and see what's going on in the marketplace locally. Our human resources team does extensive wage analysis to understand what pressures there are going to be coming forward, and also other operational expense analysis. In October, we've moved towards finalizing those budgets in preparation for presenting them to the board, which we did on November 17th. There we had our resident representative, Ann Blair, was present when the budget was presented to the board, and there was opportunity for kind of a question and answer. And then we were excused, and then behind kind of a closed door session, the board voted to approve this budget that I am presenting to you. Any questions about that planning process? So what are the sources of funds that we're utilizing, and where do they go? So one of the large ones is your monthly service fee that you pay. That contributes to the net operating margin, which you have heard me talk a lot about, and I'll refer to throughout the course of the presentation. Higher levels of living rely on Medicare and other third-party reimbursements or resources, private insurance. The entrance fees that are paid, as well as financing or bonds that we go and take and borrow, as well as investment income when times are good. The uses of those funds covering the operating expenses, the day-to-day operations of our community, the entrance fee refunds as residents transition through, debt payments. Obviously, when you take bonds, you got to pay it back, so we have debt payments to make, and then capital expenditures, which I'll get a little bit into in the presentation. Questions? Okay. So I want to talk about some of the macroeconomic conditions. You're all professionals. You all know many of these challenges. Inflation, certainly we are starting to see some easing in the wild inflation that we had seen the last year or so. So we are seeing some stabilization in prices. However, some of our costs in particular seem to still be fairly affected by inflation. Labor, property insurance is a huge one, especially here in Florida. Utilities, food costs, and then property taxes as well are some of the particular drivers in our expense increases. Housing, we're big on occupancy. Occupancy at this time, am I worried about the housing market? No, but it's always something that you want to keep an eye on, especially with housing prices being, I think, at historic highs, seeing mortgage rates also quite high, maybe some easing there. But anytime there's some volatility with the housing market, that always could potentially introduce time into our sales process. Obviously, we want to reduce that sales process and keep residents moving in. So we always want to keep an eye on the housing market. Compensation for our team members. Labor is at least 60% of our operating expenses. We have seen, I would say, general easing of some of the wage pressures that we were seeing move, whole industries. But what we're not immune to, and I think what will affect us going into next year, wage increases for very specific job sets. One example that I look at is registered nurses. The government, from a federal perspective, is taking steps to increase the number of registered nurse hours required in long-term or skilled nursing facilities, which I think, in one phase is good. You can see certainly there's probably a quality impact for care. However, I'm sure historically we've had a nursing shortage, and requiring more RNs isn't necessarily going to fix that nursing shortage. It's only going to exacerbate it. And so I think where we are going to see that is the wage rates are going to, for positions like RNs, are going to move fairly significantly throughout the year. So we have built in general wage increases, but we've also set aside essentially a reserve to be able to respond to any kind of sudden movement in very particular job areas that may impact us next year. Overall, our kind of philosophy on compensation, and this really, we do rely on the support center to do that, both local, to Central Florida, and the country in terms of analysis on where wages are, so that we can be judicious about market changes, market increases. Obviously, we want to continue to reward our team members in a competitive nature, but we also want to do that judiciously. We don't necessarily want to move whole segments if the market's not going there. So we need to be precise about it, and having that kind of analytical ability from the support center is very helpful in making sure we're doing proper stewardship of those funds. Some overall rate increases, just kind of generally as we're seeing throughout. The one I'd like to bring your attention to is the insurance premium increase. The state of Florida has just absolutely been slammed in terms of the property insurance. This insurance premium increase also covers health insurance. Obviously, as a benefit to our team members, we provide health, dental, and eye insurance. We are seeing about 20 to 30% increase in those healthcare premiums. But what's exceeding that 20 to 30% is our property insurance. As I shared, our policy year doesn't align with the fiscal year, so our policy year, which renewed, we found out in May, I think effective June 1, I think is when it went into effect. We saw a significant increase for the current policy year. Our previous annual cost for the state of Florida, so the 5 Florida communities, was $5 million a year. We had expected that to go to 6. The initial quote that came back was 10 million. We, through some coverage adjustments, reduced that to an $8 million increase in the premium. Obviously, we were $2 million short of that for the 5 Florida communities. We did not do a mid-year rate increase. It was something we felt we could absorb throughout the year. And I think, when you look at Village on the Green and the Florida communities as a whole, I think we have done fairly well in absorbing that. However, in conversations with our insurance carrier, we understand that there will be another significant rate increase in our property insurance this coming May again. So we're playing catch up in building in our current costs, and then we're also expecting another potentially 50% increase in our insurance costs again. Personally, I just got notice from Travelers Insurance that they'll no longer be providing policies in the state of Florida, so now I get to go and scramble and try and find someone hopefully before March 1st to insure my home, and I'm sure it's not going to be at the sweetheart deal that I had. So, unfortunately, I think I'd said at a Java with Joe before that, normally I don't, encourage the vocally encourage the lobbying and petitioning of legislators, but, legislators, now's not a bad time to get involved with the state of Florida and try and push, because it's not sustainable for homeowners, it's not sustainable for residents, for businesses, that we continue to see those kinds of increases in our marketplace. I know some will say, well, we've been historically low all this time. I get it, but at the same time, increases like that have a tremendous impact on our wallets. So some of the things that we have done and kind of continue to do going forward to make sure that we mitigate the impact of some of the expenses. I talked a lot about Workday. That rolled out Christmas Day last year. So we've kind of had a year to scale that up and implement that. I think we've seen tremendous benefits from a labor management perspective, but there's more we can unlock with that system. That's a software program that really ties almost 17 different original software programs together, and it's almost like every month we're finding new ways that we can kind of tighten the screws a little bit and make sure that we're running, from a labor perspective, a tight ship. Reviewing of all staffing standards customized to each community. This one does not necessarily affect Village on the Green so much. This is more geared towards our higher levels of living, which typically you staff to the census that you have. So when your census goes down, the number of RN hours, the number of CNA hours should go down kind of commensurately. I don't know historically if we have done, as an organization, a good job of making sure we're tying those two together. But at Village on the Green, because of our consistently high occupancy, we really don't have that challenge very often where we need to float the staffing levels to census, but that's something that we've got better tools now, partially through Workday, to be able to monitor that in real time and make adjustments so that we're not looking at a pay period report later going, gee, why was our overtime so high? We can go, hey, we're forecast to be this much overtime, what can we do to mitigate that? Utility contracting, we're looking at ways that we can try and lock in rates, buying energy in bulk for multiple years and trying to put a lid on some of the pricing. Community cost reductions, for us, it's agency. We've seen a real steep drop off in agency utilization over the last 2 years, but we need to continue to do that. I think 2021 was almost $600,000 in agency. This year I think we're about $200,000. Certainly an improvement, but still $200,000 goes a long way towards the bottom line. So we want to continue to make sure we chip away at those kinds of expenses.
What is an agency expense?
Agency expense is contract staff. So let's say you don't have enough RNs or LPNs on staff, but you still have to provide the care. So then you go to a contract agency and you hire them but you pay an exorbitant dollar more for that? Yeah, good question. Improved and reduced time and expense on unit turns. Really, this is kind of our feather in the cap for this year. We have gone through quite a few unit turns, as I'm sure many of you have heard and felt living in your homes. But that's going to pay dividends next year in having ready to sell inventory, and also by going through it this year, we're not paying next year's increased construction costs and labor costs there. And then optimization of ongoing costs across life space. So here are some of the numbers for Village on the Green that affect the next few slides. For independent living, we are forecasting 44 sales. We are anticipating 29 move-outs, so that's the attrition. For comparison, this year we're about 35 sales. And our attrition, I think, will be about 20. So our sales weren't necessarily where we expected from a budget perspective, but our attrition being lower than expected or forecast is to our benefit, and why you're seeing the occupancy percentage increase in independent living. The budget's built on starting at 80% in independent living for occupancy and ending at 86%. So I think it averages about to like 83.5, something like that for the budget. Again, it's a little bit of knock on wood, but based on the forecasting and the sales and deposits that we have, and the attrition of about 20, I think we'll be at about 81%, maybe 81.5% occupancy. So hopefully starting ahead of where our budgetary projections are for the fiscal year. In terms of net entrance fees, so those 44 sales are anticipated to bring in $14.7 million in entrance fees. We will be refunding approximately $6.5 million in entrance fees related to that attrition for a net of $8.2 million. The higher levels of living occupancy built on skilled nursing at 90%, assisted living at 94%, and memory care at 94%. Those numbers are actually lower than our annualized numbers for this year. In general, as a best practice, you typically don't budget more than that 92-93% in higher levels of living. So we feel good about these numbers, where they're at, and God willing, we will continue to outperform as we were doing this year. So we have built in a little bit, I wouldn't say call it cushion, but I think we were conservative in these occupancy projections here. Any questions about these numbers? So those occupancy numbers, what does that translate to from a revenue perspective? So we're anticipating about $30.3 million in revenue next year. Over half of that comes from independent living with $17 million. The next largest chunk for about a quarter of that revenue is the skilled nursing with $7.5 million. The rest is made up by assisted living, memory support, and home health. Total operating expense by department. Now this is actually a requirement of OIR. Normally I wouldn't necessarily get granular into a department level. Also, these are numbers that you'll need to take a look at. Any questions that you have, you're always welcome to contact me. I'm happy to discuss them. We'll also go into greater depth with the finance committee once they've had an opportunity to look at these numbers. But from an OIR perspective, I need to break the budget down by department. So that's where this kind of slide comes in, this eye chart comes into play here. So what you see is the 2024 budget by department, then you see the 2023 annualized, and then you see the 2022 actual. I'm going to go into some of the items that are driving some of the costs within this to give you some more context. So, things that will probably immediately jump out to you, general and admin, that's where our property insurance lives. So when you look at from 22 to 23 to 24, and you see that significant increase there, that's one of the main drivers. Plant, that 2022 actual includes a lot of costs incurred from the hurricane damage that we had. Insurance did pay, but they paid in 23, so that's why you see that $1.8 million on the 23 annualized number lower. So there's some, there's obviously pertinent kind of facts in there that'll help explain some of the changes in the numbers. Culinary, you'll see an increase there, which we'll talk about in a moment. But overall, we're anticipating our overall operating expense of $29.5 million. Any immediate questions about that before I move on? As I had mentioned, wages are a significant part of our operating expenses, so I just wanted to break that out a little bit to show kind of where those are. 2023 annualized, looking at about $14.3 million in wages, taxes, benefits, and then 2024 is about $15.1 million. There are obviously wage increases that are driving that, but there's also increases in the number of full-time equivalents that we have in our budget for next year, which I'll talk about. So there's more people and they're making more money driving that. The agency line, to your question, sir, what is that, or really what has it been? So you look at 21 was about 500,000, 2022 was 666,000. 23 annualized, 350. That number is actually a little on the higher side from an annualized perspective. The Oaks has done a really nice job the last 2 months. I think the last 2 weeks we had $500 in agency. I mean, that's not even a full shift. That's pretty amazing. Now, Thanksgiving, we probably spent $5,000, but still, for a month, that's pretty solid performance that I think they can continue to replicate. We do not budget for agency as an organization's philosophy. I can debate Nick Harshfield about this all day long, but I'm not going to win that one. Typically, I like to see about 5% in agency costs budgeted, because I haven't seen anybody really run no agency ever for a year and year and year and year. Typically, there's some agency costs incurred, but that's the organization's philosophy, and we will roll with that. So some of the what I call operational and service enhancements for next year. We're increasing in this budget is an increase in the raw food costs. So, through Culinary Corner, you've heard there's the science of how much is a meal and how much do we spend on a meal. We're putting in about $1 per meal additional. Obviously, inflation eats away a little bit at that, but we think that's an increase that will allow us to continue to grow our culinary program. How would you see that? You would see that in the cuts of meat, the varieties of seafood, the frequencies of seafood. So this is kind of something Sean and I really sat down and said, for our menu to kind of continue to evolve and be able to respond to some of the needs and requests of our residents, what do we need from a raw food perspective? We needed to see an increase in that. This frankly brings us in line with the rest of Florida as well. Village on the Green has historically trended lower. Some say regionality has effect to that. I would disagree. I think actually Central Florida sees some higher costs. I think South Florida benefits from the geographic position of being close to the ports, being close to the purveyors, and that we pay an additional cost when you start trucking and shipping things back here to Central Florida. In dining, we're seeing almost an addition of 8 full-time equivalents in a pay period to enhance quality of service. So we've talked a lot about what's going on with service, why does service time take too long, is it not enough cooks, is it not enough servers? We have a good plan as to how we intend to utilize these labor hours, but I'll tell you, it was, anytime you're adding labor hours, you really gotta make a solid case, and your feedback has certainly helped with that, both from the NPS scores, but also kind of what we want to offer here from a culinary experience needed that additional labor hours. So frankly, we're thrilled to get both the raw food and labor increases there. We'll be expanding maintenance and housekeeping coverage, so the number of hours team members are on site to be able to reduce the length of time it takes work orders to get completed. Also kind of trying to eliminate some of the dead periods that we have where there isn't a housekeeper or there isn't a maintenance technician on campus. We have incorporated, I call them preventative maintenance programs. So we've heard a lot, when are we getting our windows washed? When do we get soft wash? Those are built into this budget, both window washing and soft washing of the exterior of buildings. Those are programs certainly aesthetically improve, but you get rid of all those bugs and cobwebs. It improves the appearance. I mean, just overall keeps the community in tip-top shape. So we've incorporated that. This one, insourcing of security services. I've not officially given Allied Universal notice, but they will be getting notice from us that we'll be bringing security services in-house. I think that's the way it used to be. In fact, Terrell used to be the supervisor. Well, we're probably going right back to that. One of those things, it's something I've done at previous stops, and it's not necessarily to say like the security service improves, although I think it will when we're the ones hiring, training, and monitoring our team members. But I also find it's things like the work orders, right? Right now with Allied Universal, we contract for security services. It's not their job to do maintenance per se. Well, sometimes you just need the security guard to go into the bathroom and say, the toilet has exploded and there's 3 inches of water, or it's full, but it's okay. I can plunge it, I'll take care of it for you. So I think there's going to be opportunity to kind of weave our security team into our plant operations team and be able to help in small ways that I think will improve. Another thing is setups. Oftentimes you get an event in the morning and it's incumbent on housekeeping to come in and first thing have to scramble and set that up. Well, why couldn't a security guard put out some chairs the night before or during the night shift so that the room's set up and then the housekeeper can focus on other items. So looking to incorporate that team with our in-house plant team. And then increased resources to support lifestyles programming. This really is, it's an increase in the budget for lifestyles programming, but it's also, starting to carve out a little bit, okay, what's the wellness program look like and what does that need from a resource perspective? When we do special events, we have now a dedicated food budget for that. Before it used to come out of the lifestyles budget, I think to the detriment of the programming. So we're trying to break that up into monitorable, trackable, general ledger items, but it's also an increase in overall dollars for that group. We have a new director of kind of resident life, was she the, I don't know what her title is, home support center team member that's helping us, kind of move our programming along. And I think she's got a great team to work with here, but they need more resources, so we've incorporated that into our budget as well. So taking a little step back, we said operating revenues, 30 million, 30.3. Operating expense, 29.5, so a net operating margin of $800,000 for next year is the forecast. That's a net operating margin of 2.7%. The 2023 annualized numbers, that's another area where I think the annualized numbers are looking worse than where we will actually end up. We had a positive October, barely. But I think we're going to build on that in November and December and narrow that gap. Currently, we have a net loss of about $450,000 from a NOM perspective. I think we'll narrow that to about $200,000 loss. So compared to the $2.5 million net loss the previous year, I really would have loved to end in the black, but we certainly have kind of crawled our way out a long ways there. Questions? Capital expenditures. So our routine and maintenance is totaling $6 million. I say routine and maintenance because this is what's funded by the entrance fees. There is one project which is through financings. That's the window replacement. So that $2.4 million that you see there for the window replacement program that will continue next year, the asterisk is because that 2.4 does not compute in the routine and maintenance capital expenditure at the top. So really our total is about $8.4 million in capital from all sources. Apartment refurbs, that takes 2.8 million, but in that 2.8 million, That is both for the infrastructure improvements that we do, as well as the unit improvements that we do. So it's not just, kitchen cabinets and whatnot, it's also the electrical, the sprinkler system changes, all of that are associated with turning a unit and bringing that kind of up to current standards. A huge one is the IL kitchen renovation. So that's one that I've heard from both residents and from team members that, we're asking more and more of a kitchen that hasn't had significant updates to it, and it's not really just an equipment update. It really needs to be a reimagination of the layout to incorporate some efficiencies so that our team members can work smarter, and I think those are some of the things that will translate into faster meal times, hotter meals, potentially greater menu varieties when we talk about expanding the capability to cool foods, mise en place, so that we can assemble an omelet at any time. So that's almost $300,000 in just equipment, and then about $600,000 going towards the flooring, the hood, the Ansel system, the fire suppression system. So really it's almost $1 million in a brand new kitchen, minus the coolers, because we just did the coolers as part of the clubhouse project. So I think that'll be a significant improvement to our community's life. It will be disruptive as we get to that point and have to navigate a pretty significant outage of some sort, but that is, I think, a good thing overall coming our way. Also included for next year, $400,000 in addressing the traffic coding throughout the breezeways in the apartment building. So that's your exterior walkways that have been cracking and peeling, and all of that is a project to address that whole system as well. And then grading and hardscaping for drainage issues. Yes, we have some drainage issues that this will go towards, but our little secret, this is my way of sneaking landscaping into a capital budget. You call it grading and hardscaping, yes. So we have some funds there to kind of continue. Obviously, you're seeing tree limbs falling left and right. That's kind of like hopefully the last of our big cleanup there, and then we can start to get into actual beautifying beds and shrubs and trees and all of that. The capital budget I have a hard copy of. I will review that with the plant committee and with the finance committee, because there are a ton of projects on there that didn't make this list, new large bus, all sorts of good stuff that I think residents will see as needed. Because obviously these are, we want to be prudent with our capital funds as it contributes to our net cash position, but I think there's a lot of things that have been deferred for some time that we're going to be able to address, and I think put ourselves in a better position for future years. So net cash flow. So I told you, our net operating margin was at $805,000, and we were netting $8.2 million. So that subtotal of net cash is $9 million. Debt service expense is $6 million. On top of the capital expenditures, $6 million. These capital expenditures are the routine and maintenance one. That's why I said there's a little bit of a difference. The $2.4 million set aside for the windows through bond aren't calculated under capital expenditures. Essentially, they're built into debt service. So the subtotal of cash uses is negative $12 million for a net cash flow of negative $3 million. Questions?
Have any of the items that were earlier included in the campus beautification projects, has any of that been budgeted for next year?
So the question was, have any of the projects related to the campus beautification, I'm assuming you're also talking about the entryway update, have those been included in the capital budget? So the entryway project, which touches the front of the community, the porte cochere, the service yard, that project is being funded from financings. So that is built in under debt service, right? So that's money we borrow that we're paying back. It is not a part of necessarily like the community's capital budget to execute. That really becomes a support center project to deliver on. So as it stands right now, I don't have an update on that project. Those funds are available. work continues to develop the porte cochere scope of work and the maintenance yard scope of work. We nixed the pavilion. We have paused on the front entrance work altogether until our ambiguous opportunity comes to light. And it is, I know I keep saying this, but it's looking good. It's looking good. So I'm hoping to have some good news on that front, because that's kind of the last straw there. Once we have a determination on that, then I think we will know exactly what we're looking at for when those projects are going to start rolling, and then what it entails and how much it costs and all that. Yes, sir.
What's the status of the cleanup of those dead trees out behind the buildings?
The question was, what's the status of the clean out of the dead trees behind the building? So you talk about in the fairways between 12 and 13. So, truthfully, I don't have any work scheduled for that. And nor does this coming budget have anything specifically to address those trees. I think if we get to the point where we have addressed all the issues on campus, we fixed all the sidewalks, the kitchen's new, the windows are good, the buildings are looking great, and we have money to spare, then that's probably like one of those things that yes, we'd like to address long term. My guess is that doesn't happen until we do a broader master plan to understand how we're going to use those fairways, for future development, and that those trees and those wetlands would be addressed in the master planning process there. So, anytime you start moving earth and building houses or apartment buildings or whatnot, I think that's when those will be addressed. So for the time being, unless something is kind of eminently falling close to a walkway, if it's going to fall in the middle of a swamp, I'm not really chasing after it right now. Yeah, good questions. Joy?
Yes, quite frequently when people move in, whether it's to an apartment or a villa, they experience a lot of problems because things weren't done right the first time, and I'm sure that adds to our expense. How are you addressing this?
I think, did everybody hear the question?
No.
Yes. No? So essentially the question was, when people move in now, they often experience issues that should have been addressed prior to move-in, and then it adds expense to have a contractor go back and fix things, so it adds more expense to our operations. What am I doing to address that? I think really from a process perspective, there's multiple tools that are available to us that we can utilize to help us, quality check, quality control a unit turn, but we need the right personnel to execute upon that. So it takes someone who understands quality improvement and believes in it and utilizes it. And I think just in our short time working with Lenny, he gets it, and that we're trying to play a little bit of catch up and get those systems in place. Ultimately, whether it's Lenny or another plant director, one of the things that's incumbent upon that position is to own kind of quality control overall. So, you can apply it to unit turns, you can apply it to work order completion, you can apply it to work order communication. We just need someone who understands that philosophy and applies that to all things within the plant and housekeeping realm to improve operations. I think we'll save certainly from repeat calls, but I think you see resident satisfaction improvements, you see team member satisfaction improvements. So it's a little bit of, I need the right people in the right seat to kind of advance those things. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to use the wheel appropriately. Yes, ma'am.
What is the white truck and the crew in the 17th fairway been doing the last couple of days?
The white truck in the 17th
Yeah.
fairway.
It was there yesterday, starting closer to Sable Pond.
Where that well
Now it's
was.
moved down.
Where the well was. And it wasn't one of the tree trimming trucks?
No, they're out the fairway doing something like, it looks like drilling, but I was wondering if it's core sampling.
They may be. That might be related to the ongoing work with the campus beautification, because they did, whether we're doing the front entrance or not, as part of kind of the overall campus, any kind of permits that we go towards. Any land disruption is going to require, studies by, are we St. John's? I think we're St. John's Water Management District. So my guess is though, we did a lot of site surveying, so you see the stakes all over the place. I'm sure some of that is probably related to some of the studies that need to be done for any projects done on campus. But I'm not 100% sure. I can certainly check on that, but that's my guess, is it's related to
There
that.
was someone pushing a measuring device and putting stakes in the ground.
It wasn't me measuring for Christmas lights?
Oh,
No? Okay.
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah, holiday lights. Good questions. All right, big reveal. 9%. 9%. Now, I say on average because there are some contracts and the way a resident discount is applied as a fixed dollar amount, when you take 9% off of the market rate and then you apply the discount, you're looking at a tenths off here and there. Your exact rate increase will be in a letter delivered to you Thursday. That's what Javi and I are triple checking tomorrow and will be delivering. That is for all levels of living: independent, skilled, assisted, memory care. The entrance fees, while this doesn't apply to you necessarily, on average 5%. I say average because we're going to be a little bit more precise about how we implement the rate increases. The villas will increase more than the apartments. One bedrooms we're trying to keep that down as much as possible to remain competitive from the entrance fee perspective. So I say on average 5%. So where does that sit us? So of that 9%, 3.5% of it is property insurance. When you look at, these are, I know it's an eye chart, but these are all the communities within LifeSpace. If you look at the kind of across the top there, who hits 9%, it's all the Florida communities because we're all in that same insurance policy. The rest of LifeSpace, between 5.5% and 7.5% rate increases throughout the system. I know it's no relief to you, but really you take that 3.5% from the property insurance perspective out, and we're really in line with the rest of the organization. I would actually say that other communities have had FTE reductions and service adjustments that I think you're not going to see in ours. I think from what you'll see in the raw food, what you'll see in the labor increases, it will give us the resources to be able to deliver on the program and the quality at the level at which you expect. I think we've made some good strides this year in making sure that we have the systems and processes in place to make sure we're utilizing your dollars well, but we need some more of them to really get to where we want to be from a community perspective.
Joey,
Yes, ma'am.
do I understand that we as individuals will be given a price increase? Or is it 9% across the board?
I'm not sure I quite
Is
understand.
it a 9% increase in our monthly fee?
Yes, ma'am.
Period.
9% with an asterisk depending on the contract type. Could be 0.1%, could be 8.9, could be 9.1, but on average it's 9%. Just dependent. Yep. Anita. Yeah, go ahead.
You know the question.
Yes, ma'am.
Coming.
Yes, ma'am.
Is the rate increase applied to the market rate or what we actually owe?
To the market rate. So the what you had shared with me earlier this year, yes, ma'am, that continues, and that is the 9%.
That is still wrong. Now that will cost me an extra $55.89, and you're calling that a 9% increase, but it'll actually be more than that.
For you,
Increase
yes.
over what I owe,
Yes, ma'am.
which
For you.
applies to everyone here
No.
that has that
Yes, it depends on the
contract
contract.
credit.
Yes, ma'am.
Because we're being charged an increase on that so-called contract credit.
The contract
Just that
credit doesn't
everyone-
grow. Yes, that contract discount from a dollar perspective stays the same. That doesn't grow by 9%. So you're 100% correct, but so for people when they look at their statements, some people don't have that credit, right? If they've come
Right,
in
if they just
recently,
moved in more recently.
they don't have that credit. So for them, it's a straight 9% off of their monthly service.
But the rest of us are getting ripped off to the tune of, you know, whatever, for me, like I said, it's an additional $55.89.
Mhm. Yes, I understand that. Yep. And that's why your rate increase, that letter specifically lays out what your rate increase is, and you can calculate.
And
the
does it
exact
explain
percentage.
how they justify doing that, applying the rate to that, the increase to that market rate rather than applying it to the amount that we actually owe each month?
No, the letter does not get into
I
that.
would still like an explanation of how they can justify that. The first increase that we got after they started this market rate business and the contract discount, the increase we got in August last year, that rate increase was applied to what we owe.
Mhm.
And then in January, all of a sudden, they switched to
Mhm.
applying it to the market rate. So
That's-
this year, that wasn't terribly significant, because that only cost me $7 additional. But this year,
The
I don't appreciate an additional $55 a month increase based on their bookkeeping
Mhm.
thing, with that market rate.
No, so I understand.
It's not right.
And I'm not trying to defend it, but it didn't occur until the market rate was introduced. Really, the bifurcation wasn't a model that the company used until they deployed it. And then, yes, that's where.
Last year, it was August. And that first rate
Mhm.
increase was applied to the amount we owe.
Because
Even though that market rate was on the statement, at that point, they still had to come up with that trick of applying it to the other amount
okay.
to increase our increases.
I hear you, man, and I understand that you're still waiting for that explanation of.
And
The
I think
practice.
everyone should realize, recalculate look at that rate calculation, look at apply that 9% to what you owe each month,
Mhm.
and then look at what
Mhm.
what the letter says your new monthly rate's gonna be, just see how much you're getting ripped off there. And that's what it is, to me.
Okay.
So it's more than 9%.
It could be, yes, on average.
Could what? I didn't hear that.
Could your specific rate increase be more than 9%? Yes, depending on your contract.
How much
Yes.
more than 9%?
I can't sit and go through every single person's contract. What I will do is give you a letter that explains exactly what your rate increase is. Okay. Let's do one more hot button. Christmas culinary program. Okay. We will offer a culinary program on both Christmas Eve and Christmas Day in Independence. The exact details, we are hammering that out right now. I kind of goofed up my calendar thinking the culinary committee was soon. It's not. So what we're going to do, we still want to let the culinary committee know. So we'll be probably communicating initially electronically and then touching base with the members to let them know what we've got up our sleeve. I don't anticipate that it will cause any heartburn. I think it'll be a smidge different. It'll be a smidge different in the timing of it. We're trying to do kind of all hands on deck for one massive seating versus trying to drag it out over two seatings. But that's what we're trying to kind of work out right now. So trying to keep our team members at home for Christmas morning with their kids, and then come into work and put on a Christmas Day program for you.
where will this take place?
Where will this take place? My guess is everywhere. Yeah.
No, I mean,
Even the lounge,
the,
here and the lounge.
the dinner, it will be in the Palm Court?
Yeah, so Christmas Eve is going to be, I think, I think it's a Sunday this year, so I think it's going to be your typical programming, but you know, special for Christmas. And Monday, Christmas Day. Do I have my days right? I think I have my days right. Yes, will be the big Christmas dinner. It's kind of a lunch dinner. Yeah.
And that will be in our.
I'll be honest, I think that's going to be everywhere. If
Well,
we
I
can,
mean, sure,
yeah,
then we'll have.
like Longwood, Lounges, Heron, Palm, Sable. Yep.
Okay.
You're all-
Yep.
Yeah, because then you can't, I can't.
I didn't mean specifically, but it's not all the house.
Yes, ma'am.
Will you need to restrict invitation of guests and family members?
No, that's not our
Well,
intent
what's
to
the question?
restrict. The question was, will we need to restrict the number of attendees? No. We have kind of gone back and looked at what did we do in previous Christmas from a volume perspective? What did we do on Thanksgiving from a resident and guest perspective? And the numbers work. The numbers work from like almost 400 people. We can make it work. So now, I don't think we saw, I think our highest calculation was 350, and we said, well, if we can make it 400, then should be good. The Sunday also affords us the opportunity to set up in advance, so that we don't have quite as much to have to do Monday morning, Christmas Day morning. So we're working through all of those kind of logistics of it. And we're not going to force it if it doesn't work from like a one seating perspective, but we think we can pull it off well.
Will this be a buffet?
I believe so. It'll be a buffet. Yep. The Around the World, which was originally slated for Christmas Eve, I think there's a dinner dance on the 20th. We're just going to move the theme of the Around the World and the various Christmas celebrations to that dinner, so that we can still say to the support center we did it, but then pull off Christmas in the more traditional way that I think folks had requested. And then in January, we're going to look to do something special for the team members, get a little fun event off campus for them to, maybe play some arcade games or do something like that for them. Just kind of a thank you for working on Christmas and everything. So more details to come on that. I'm not sure if I'll have it in time for my memo on Friday or the door hanger on Friday, but it will be, if it's not, it'll be the very next week in terms of plans. So those of you with family coming in and whatnot, fear not, there will be service, and more details to come on that. Okay? So next meeting, our December is our next, it's our all residents meeting on the 13th, but that's also our quarterly Chapter 651 required meeting as well. So please mark your calendars. Questions?
Still in shock.
Still in shock, thank you, Joe.
Call 911.
As they come to mind later, call me, stop by my office, email me, whatever it is your preferred method of communication. Let me know. I'm here to answer those questions. If I don't know the answer, I will find out. Next up, I will be doing a similar presentation for the Finance Committee. It goes into a little bit more detail on the budget for them, and then we'll get into capital budgets with Plan Committee and Finance Committee. Remember, this is for February 1st. This is not January 1st, your rate increases. I did not explicitly mention that. This is your presentation, but the letter you receive is the technical 60 days advance notice. So that's why February 1st is when this actually goes into effect. Okay. Thank you, wonderful questions. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for not throwing anything at me.
Take some time
time to put your
Take
lights
some
back
time.
up.
Yes, yes. All right, thank you, everyone. Stand adjourned.